Hi, this is John Lee, and thank you for tuning in to this video tutorial series about Synfig Studio, a very powerful 2D vector animation program that was originally proprietary software created by Robert Quattlebaum with some help from Adrian Bentley for their animation studio Voria Studios, but was eventually released unfinished back in 2005 as free open source software after Voria Studios closed down. So since then, a group of dedicated volunteers from the community have been developing and maintaining Synfig, adding new features, updates, and bug fixes on a regular basis for three major platforms: Linux, Mac OS X, and Windows. And the idea behind Synfig was to create high-quality 2D animation while cutting out the time-consuming, difficult, and expensive process of in-betweening. Synfig achieves this by using vector graphics, which are basically mathematical formulas that draw shapes as opposed to bitmap graphics like JPEGs, BMPs, PNGs, GIFs, and many other file formats, all of which use a bunch of tiny dots called pixels to create an image. But with vector graphics, you can smoothly morph from one shape to another without having to draw all the pictures in between. An amazing thing about Synfig is that even though it was developed before 2005, it still has the most powerful point-by-point vector tweening engine in the world, and it's free. But the downside is, because Synfig was never fully completed, the program is still missing important features like the ability to use audio or native camera, and it's notoriously difficult to learn for beginners. Well, actually it really isn't, but video tutorials, which are really the fastest and easiest way to learn new software, are in short supply. So for the moment, the best place to learn about Synfig is by heading to the user forum, searching the various topics, and if you still can't find an answer, ask questions. The user community is very helpful and supportive, and a terrific resource for learning about Synfig's intermediate to advanced features. Most of the basic stuff you can learn through the online documentation, and hopefully there'll be more video tutorials to ease in beginners. So let's start up. Let's take a look at Synfig Studio's layout. On the upper left, this is a project I happen to be working on, and actually it shows a nice difference between vector and bitmap graphics. Let me just go into that really quickly. So I imported a bitmap image. In this case it's a PNG, and for the face I managed to convert the face into vector format. Eventually I have the whole body converted to vector, but for now only the face has been completed, and you can see as I zoom in that the vector parts are crisp, they're perfectly clear, but as you zoom into the bitmap you can see it starts to break up and get splotchy. And the closer you zoom in, the worse it gets. It's kind of like that effect when you're looking at a newspaper and you use a magnifying glass to look at the newspaper and you see that's actually made out of little dots. It's kind of the same principle behind bitmaps. But with vector, because it's using mathematical formulas, it's just redrawing the shapes, and it looks perfect no matter how closely you zoom in or no matter how closely you zoom out. So it's usually ideal for print, it's great for animation, and it future-proofs you for the increasing resolution sizes that happen from generation to generation. So eventually we're going to be hitting the 4K resolution format, which is insane, but eventually that'll become commonplace and you won't have to worry about redrawing your files. All you have to do is just export them to the higher resolution, because vector, as I mentioned, keeps its resolution no matter what. Keeps its clarity no matter what the resolution. So that's just an interesting example. Let me zoom back out. Alright, so I got a little ahead of myself. On the upper left corner of the screen, we have our toolbox. And the toolbox has all of our tools. If you highlight your mouse pointer over a specific tool, it'll tell you what the tool does. The transform tool, which moves objects around the canvas. Our spline tool, our circle tool, our or square tool, the explanations are kind of self-explanatory. But in addition to various tools and fill colors, you also have these file menu options like new, open, save, save as, save all. These are all typical settings that you see in most other programs. And an interesting button here is the setup program. This is one of the first things I usually fiddle with when I'm starting a new project. I usually make sure my settings are set to 1920 by 1080. And Synfig is already set up to, has a preset for 4K settings. So that's kind of interesting. But I'm still okay with the lo-fi HD setting for now. And I usually set my project to 30 frames per second. Let's see. There's some other settings here that you can play with if you want. There's a Cairo render, which is a new render engine that is supposed to be faster than the regular render engine. That was a new feature that was recently added. And you can also check out the Synfig version about Synfig Studio here. The version I happen to be on is 0.64.0, and this is actually a development version that was released on August 26, 2013. That was about 2 weeks ago. So even though even though Synfig is officially dead software back in 2005, the user community has been really active, and they post updates on a regular basis, and they post official stable versions usually about once a year or once every 2 years, something like that, which is kind of cool. All right, so the next window in the center at the top is the canvas window. And the canvas is where you basically draw all of your artwork and create your animation. And it also has its own file menu that basically does the same things. If you click this little arrow button at the top left corner, it's kind of small, but you can also do the same thing. You can save as, you can import PNG by selecting import here. You can edit your canvas, checking the properties. So here you can name the canvas. Here's our canvas settings. Let's see. Here you can set the time. The frames per second is supposed to be 30. And it's set for 3 seconds. Start time 0, end time 3 seconds. Alright, let's see what other features we have here. You also have your tools, which you can this is just another way to access your tools. Here you have different layers that you can add in. Filters, special effects. This is kind of useful, that the transform layer, which are various tools to manipulate your layers. You can also do a group layer. You can access these tools. These are basically redundant, but you can access them on the canvas. But generally, you use them. Generally, you use the toolbox for your tools. You use your panel layer, which is over here, your panel viewer, to access your layer functions, etc., etc. But they've centralized them all here on the canvas, just in case you want another way to use your tools. And the interesting thing about the canvas layer is that you see this little green man on the bottom right corner. This lets you enter animating mode. And in animating mode, when you start manipulating your artwork, it will actually animate. Whereas if you turn off the red man and go back to non-editing animating mode, all you're doing is drawing artwork. You're basically laying the foundation, and the artwork will not animate, even though you make changes at different points of the timeline. You have to be in animating mode, so that's very important. There are plenty of times where I just forget to click on this little green man and make sure he's a red man when I'm animating. And yeah, it saves time to make sure that you remember when this is on and when this is off. So right now I'm just leave it off. Now the other panels are basically dock dialogues. Here on the bottom we have this panel here. They call it the time track, But this is actually a timeline, and you can see here 0 frames, 1 second, 2 second, and 3 seconds. So you can see 3 seconds long, and you can actually go through the timeline if you want. There's another panel here. This is our, if you hover your mouse pointer over it, our parameters panel all the way on the left. And if I select a layer, there'll be a context-sensitive set of parameters for that layer, depending on the layer type. So here we have the Z depth, which is its location in 3D space. The amount, which is really opacity, and you can see if you hover over it, it tells you the alpha channel of the layer, the blend method, which you know, you have all these different settings that are typical in other art graphics programs like overlay, multiply, add, subtract, brighten, etc. Here's your color. So this is a spline region. Those are the lower lips in the artwork. Color is red, obviously. The origin, etc. There's all these different features that you can play around with. And here, you can cycle through the different tabs. That's the library. And here's our keyframes tab. This is where we actually create our keyframes. So yeah, you can add a keyframe here, add a keyframe here. Ooh, and you have to be in animating mode when you're doing that. Remember, you must be in animating mode if you want to animate. But essentially, clicking on add new keyframe, what it does is it creates, it saves all of the settings for every single parameter at that point in time. So if I create a keyframe at the 0 second mark, it creates what we call a waypoint for literally every single value. So the Z depth, the color, the opacity, the size of the object, etc., etc. Every single parameter creates a waypoint for literally every single parameter. And that's a fine point that I want to discuss briefly, the difference between a waypoint and a keyframe. A waypoint only saves the value of one parameter. Like, for instance, you only want to save the color of your shape, which is, say, red. It only saves the value red for that one waypoint. But a keyframe saves it creates a waypoint for literally every single parameter. So that's the difference between a waypoint and a keyframe. And keyframes become really handy later on because you can actually copy and paste keyframes to various points of your timeline to reuse animation. This is a concept that was that's very similar in Anime Studio, where they call it actions, but here in Synfig we call it duplicate keyframe. But in theory, it basically has the same purpose. It allows you to take keyframes and reuse them throughout your animation and saves you a ton of time. But I'll get to that in a future video tutorial. That's a more advanced feature that, or maybe not really advanced, maybe more intermediate feature that I'll get into maybe when I actually finish completing this project, which will hopefully be soon. Alright, so now where was I? Okay, so I was discussing the panels, keyframe panel. You can actually, okay, so here's some other panels. This panel is our, over on the bottom right corner, is our layers panel, and shows you all of the orders of the layers. So this layer is above this layer, is above this layer, is above this layer. I think it's kind of self-explanatory. And you can actually, if you hold down Shift, you can actually select a range of layers and you can group them into a layer if you wanted to. Yeah, so I think that's kind of self-explanatory. And above the layer panel is a bunch of other interesting things. Here's our history. If you just hover over the panel here, it just says history. And that just shows you what you've done. And you can undo, you can redo, etc. Here is our canvas browser. You can actually have more than one canvas in a given project. Right now I only have one canvas, but eventually I'll probably have dozens of canvases easily. And one interesting thing about Synfig, well, I'll get to that later, but okay, let me just go through the panels first. So above the canvas browser is the layer palette. I'm sorry, the palette editor, which is all the different colors that you can choose from. Next to that is some information about the values, etc. I never really look at that. And above the color palette is your canvas browser, so you can actually look around and zoom in if you want, or zoom out. Oops, notice she has a bald spot. This is, as I mentioned, this project is still incomplete, so I haven't gotten around to doing her hair yet. Let me just zoom in a little bit closer so you don't get to see her bald spot. Alright, so that's a general overview of the panel layout. How about we get to doing a little bit of artwork and some animation. So let me close this out and I'll start a new project. Oh shoot, I think this program just crashed on me. Alright, let me just Control-Alt-Delete. Yeah, sometimes that happens when I'm trying to resize the panel. I don't know why, but there are many other... Oh shoot, I did it again, didn't I? Ugh. Close that out. Synfig Studio's not behaving today. It's usually not this bad, but sometimes it does crash just randomly for no reason. So it's a good idea to save often and frequently. Alright, so I'm going to go back to the Tools panel and create a circle. Now, when I select the Circle tool, notice that in the Circle tool panel over here all the way on the right, basically our Tool Options panel, you have all these different settings that you can check off. And generally what I like to do is check off the Create Outline, Create Region, Link Origins, and Spline Origins at Center when I'm creating my artwork. And you can actually choose the number of points that come with your circle from the start. So in this case I'm going to have 4. But for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to go with the Create Circle layer because it has some interesting features. Although I never really use the Create Circle layer unless I need a specific graphical element, because when you create a circle layer, it always stays as a circle. You can't really edit its points to be anything else. But the trade-off is it has some nice editing features that save time if all you want is a circle. So let's do that. We're going to create our circle right here. There's a nice red circle. Just hold down the left mouse button and drag out from where you click down. And you'll notice these two little handles. One handle is the origin point of the circle, and you can also drag it around to move the entire position. And the other handle is the radius handle, which allows you to adjust the size of the circle. And that's it. Kind of comes in handy when all you want to do is manipulate a circle, or all you need is a circle. Didn't actually create the outline for the circle, but that's okay. I didn't check that off anyway, so that's why I didn't. And the next thing we want to do is create another circle and play with this thing called linking, where we can link two properties of a circle, and I'll show you why that's useful. So here I'm creating another circle. Notice it creates another center point. Oh my god, again it did this. I was trying to make the canvas larger so that it would appear a little more clearly on the video, but Synfig is not behaving today. Let me just get back to that. Recover. Okay, so now it has a nice recovery feature. Alright, I'm not going to try to edit the canvas size again. Okay, so if I click on the radius handle for one circle and I control click on the other circle or command click on the Mac, you'll have both circles selected at the same time, and I click on, and I control or command click on the other radius handle for the other circle, both of those points will now become highlighted. And what you do is you right click on any one of those highlighted handles, and you'll see two options. The option that we're interested in is link. So if you click link, notice that it made both of these circles the exact same size. But not only that, if you, alright, so let's say I click one circle and I adjust the radius handle here, it changes the size of the other circle to be the exact same size. And because only the radius handle is linked, the origin, the position of the circle can be different. So I can move the circle all the way over here and adjust the radius angle, and you notice it changes. So that comes in handy when you want to edit artwork or you know, have cute little animation tricks by linking objects together. Alright, so now let's say we want to change one of the colors of the circles. Here we have our fill color. All you have to do is go over to your color palette and choose a different color. So let's try blue. And then you choose your fill bucket tool and you click on circle and it becomes blue. Pretty easy, pretty self-explanatory. Alright, so I think that covers it for now for this lesson. In the next lesson, we will get involved with the animation basics. We will be reproducing the red strobing light on Knight Rider using this red circle. Anyway, thanks for tuning into this video, and I hope to see you in the next animation lesson, and thanks for watching. Take care.